Hello everyone, today we're at BAYER International Hub in Basel, Switzerland, and welcome to the eCommert podcast. With us, we have Andy Parker, Director of Sales and Commercial EMEA at BAYER Consumer Health, and we have Andre Cremers, the Director of Insights and Analytics at the BAYER Consumer Health. Now I'll leave the floor to those two brilliant gentlemen. They're going to share some great insights and what's happening in their team and the division broader sense. And Andre and Andy, please start introducing yourself and let's kick it off.
Great. Well, welcome to Basel.
Thank you.
So we'll introduce ourselves and then go into a bit more detail. So we actually work as a trio. We're missing a fundamental part today, our colleague MT, but we'll go back to that later on. So I look after the commercial and customer element of what we do in EMEA. So in effect, as I said, we work in this flywheel model. My job is to take the great stuff that Andre, MT and the teams do and then translate that into strategies and partnership models that work with our biggest customers in the region.
And Andre?
Yeah, hi, I'm Andre, and actually my job is then to enable the team. So actually to give the right insights and analytics to Andy and MT from a commercial point of view or from a marketing point of view, what they should actually do to make better decisions.
That's kind of my final flywheel. I'm educating myself a lot in that area. And now I'm spending some time with no-code AI tools to accelerate my analytics vision. Hopefully we'll catch up on very funny topics. So guys, tell us about the current projects, what you guys are working on, what you're building, and how are you laying out the foundation for the next quarter, maybe next year's, what's ahead of you?
Sure. So I think e-commerce is one of those spaces that has evolved aggressively in the minds of a lot of companies since COVID, but actually it's been growing and growing and growing for well over a decade. And that COVID spike really doubled down the focus on e-com. So what we've done more recently in BAYER is decided we were going to be really, really intentional with online and e-com and digital because it's so important to the healthcare consumer across EMEA. And so around about a year ago, and in correlation with our DSO model, which we'll talk about, we'll leave that three-letter acronym for later on. We actually set our team up to reflect what was important for the customer, what was important for the modern consumer, and then we start to work backwards from that. And that's how we ended up with our flywheel model, as we call it. So from an EMEA strategic operations point of view, really what that means is we've started to reimagine how to set up for success. We tried to break out of that sort of classic silo thinking, and we built an organization which, talking about it from the customer standpoint, we really put the shopper and the customer right in the center of this new mission. From a commercial standpoint, what that meant was it really changed our perspective on where growth was going to come from. Even though it's under 20% of online business in healthcare,
which is quite huge.
Which is still quite huge.
Yeah,
still quite big, absolutely. Still a good 80% is going to be offline. And so what we started to do is say, okay, how do we set up to really maximize and be efficient on that whole journey for the business? So from a sales point of view, it was about how do we figure out working with partners like the Amazons and the online pharmacies. But from an analytics perspective, it was equally a pretty major shift starting last year, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. From insights analytics, it was a big shift also in BAYER's mindset, and we also needed to identify first, okay, where we really want to focus.
Right.
It's so much data out there. What does really drive value? And then we identified actually, okay, we need to double down on revenue management for e-commerce because profitability, I think everyone can relate to it. It's a huge challenge in this space. So what we therefore actually did is directly said, okay, let's focus on it, get additional resources to get it right. But at the same time, we realized relatively early, you cannot look at it in isolation.
No, it should be cross-functionally integrated, and it should be seamlessly benefiting different teams, different users in those teams. Exactly.
Absolutely, because as we know, Amazon actually just uncovers what you're doing wrong in your base business and isn't actually a problem, right?
Of course.
So, and therefore we said, okay, let's take this now holistically and think about cross-channel implications. Let's really focus on what drives value for us. So, and we said, okay, what can we do actually short-term and long-term? Because we want to do something quickly. And we said super important to actually avoid this channel conflict, which we're seeing, is focus on the right portfolio.
Yes, it's a problem in many categories. We were just talking about it with Stefan at Husqvarna. He's a VP of DTC. He's also focusing on omnichannel retailers, strategy and account planning, not being disadvantaged by the DTC growth as well. And in your case, consumer care, massively growing in B2C, but also e-commerce and online revenue, 20% is quite massive compared to other categories. It's a sensitive topic. And revenue growth, price promotion, and all the account plannings with data, it's a risky area to make a lot of mistakes if it's not structured properly.
Absolutely, and we weren't set up for success because we are a historically grown company, as I think many others are, without a big e-com focus. Right. And therefore our portfolio was also not in place to be the best in class portfolio which we would like to have for the online space. So what we therefore did is first doing an exercise actually on mix management, identify, okay, what should we do of our existing portfolio, which is good for on and offline, but brings challenges. And then we said, okay, we also need to put really deep focus on innovation and getting them more agile and quicker and serving also right consumer demands actually in this challenge.
Quick question. I worked in biotech for the first 4 years of my career. I originally studied molecular biology and oncology diagnostics. So I know how complicated and very cumbersome process innovation in the biotech or healthcare is. When you say innovation on product assortment or product catalog, are you referring to restructuring existing SKUs in different bundles, different assortments, or are you seriously considering developing new products meeting the consumer demand, like Andy mentioned, putting the consumer at the center while we're preparing the new phase? Which one is, or the mix of both?
Actually, both.
Okay.
So, because if you think about product differentiation, that's what for us is bundling or just a bigger size. These are, relatively speaking, quick wins, but quick wins in a OTC world still takes time. So actually need to make here a call out to MT, which also put a huge effort into breaking the existing process which we had in place, how it's to launch actually just a different count size, which normally takes really like a year or longer to a few months, which was already an amazing result. And all this then also supported by the right data from a revenue management point of view to identify actually white spaces and avoid future channel conflict, which was amazing.
All right. Actually, this is quite exciting and a little bit of unorthodox compared to the many other consumer brands, especially in your category, because consumer care and OTC is really a complex category to move agile in an e-commerce environment if you don't build a baseline and infrastructure strong enough to carry the load, carry the speed. So I'm glad to hear that global big player like BAYER is taking very serious steps in agile structure and you guys leading the effort. This is exciting and I'm learning a lot too. So one of the questions we discussed, how this omnichannel acceleration that we all talk about, that we all study about, and I write a lot about e-commerce acceleration too. How is this omnichannel acceleration impacting your strategy and ops in the current initiatives you're leading?
It's a good question. I think we talked about e-com being on a general rise,
right?
And you know, the important thing is understanding why that is, I think. And it's different depending on the categories, and you have to be really customer centric. And when we say customer, we're talking about shopper here. But I'll differentiate between shopper and account just for my own sanity.
Right.
So when we look at the journey that the modern European goes on, when it comes to healthcare, even though, as we said before, the percentage perhaps of sales as one indicator, it maybe is 20% or even less. What we found, or what we find, unsurprisingly perhaps to many, is that a good 80% sometimes of the shopper path to purchase, all the way from the critical moments of truth, all the way through to how they experience search, how they are inspired by it to buy products, or equally for us, when they're concerned and when they're looking for understanding and education about a particular health need, a vast amount of these are digitally touched in some way, right?
Exactly.
And so
75%, according to Gartner, digitally influenced sales impact on offline sales in the US is 75%.
And what we find is maybe even though EMEA is possibly slightly behind APAC and the US on that from a consumer adoption standpoint, and I need to caveat that there's lots of complexities with managing, a good number, double-digit countries in the EMEA, which means it's never going to be totally the same, right? But what we find generally is that the consumer and the shopper today needs our help in this space. So they do not shop and consume and explore brands and engage with brands in a linear way. I mean, this is not news I think to a lot of us, but it's still how a lot of businesses are structured, right? And how they're deciding where we're going to put our resources and our time and our efforts.
Seamless omnichannel experience between offline and online is still a challenge with even most advanced CPG companies, with most advanced eCommerce operations. So
for sure. And when we think about that exact thing, and from a revenue management perspective and an insight perspective, of course, there's probably deeper to go, because it's the glue, it's the enabler of this whole piece. When it comes to the EMEA strategy and how we've started to move forward, we looked at what we're here to do, which is deliver health for all and hunger for none as our mission as a business. And there are hundreds of millions of consumers that we need to reach and deliver for. And that means to do that in a personalized way, the way a lot of shops and consumers want to experience and expect to experience brands today. It means that we actually have to have quite a deep, almost reset of our things like analytics, data, revenue management.
So you mentioned you're building the flywheel, putting the consumer at the center, and then you're going backwards. How is it being implemented behind the wheels or under the hood? How data and the revenue aspect of this, because at the end, yes, consumer satisfaction and omnichannel experience is ultimate goal, but it should also benefit the business in terms of revenue and the profitability. How you build the engine under the hood to make this work in all shifts and all gears?
Yeah. So I could now start with buzzword bingo and say AI, machine learning, end-to-end consumer journey. But truth to be told, I think, as you already mentioned, not many companies are already there to have unified commerce, omni-commerce, all the data we actually need. And the same is true for revenue management, and the same is also true for BAYER. So actually, before we're now talking all the fancy stuff, getting the fundamentals right. That's for me the key piece. And I always like to talk about smart data, not only big data analytics, because if you get the foundation right, then you can accelerate later. And you shouldn't also lose the vision of having a good end-to-end data connection. Now I use my buzzword on my own, but anyway. So smart data, what does it mean for me? So
I like it actually. Compared to big data, I think it makes more sense, smart data, but what does it mean for you and BAYER?
Smart data for me and BAYER means let's look what business questions we need to answer. What are the key business challenges actually we have to understand our consumers and customer? So this doesn't mean you need all the data. That's exactly my point. But focus what is relevant for the certain business question to answer and then connect it. And this has actually two benefits. You limit the scope of information which you need with, I will not go into this detail, but if you think about a data architecture and back-end stuff, it will also accelerate the speed. It makes it less costly also to go behind it. And you answer directly questions to, again, serve a consumer and customer. You're not losing your focus.
You mentioned really interesting point at the last sentence, because maintaining data storage, data flow, data pipeline, and the machine models behind the scenes, it's really costly. You may not answer this, it's up to you. Are you relying on some internal IP solutions built, or are you relying on our external partners to reduce the cost, to accelerate the data flow and maintain the security of all these data models you build? Because I see there are a lot of direction in many CPGs trying to build some IP solutions in-house because it's really costly. Mm-hmm. Can you shed some light on this, if you may?
So actually we're doing both. And it has both benefits and costs to it. So, you mentioned the cost part for sure. So financially, if you outsource it, it could be also sometimes actually cheaper depending where you outsource.
Which player you choose, yes.
Exactly, it depends on the players you choose. In-housing, you need to have the right people and the right expertise, which is also a challenge because we are not a tech company. So it takes time, but I'm an honest believer that it's great to have good capabilities and these skills in-house because it will be more sustainable for your success.
Right.
And you can also easier experiment because then you can do your own ideas a short period of time and just try new things and you get a competitive advantage. If you just buy outside, you're just getting what everyone already.
That's true. That's true. And I have a couple of examples, maybe shed some light in the coming minutes. And there is a really big benefit building some of those capabilities inside, but I also true believer of that rather than technical and competitive advantage benefit, I also believe it's a big benefit for upskilling the team. Because some of the talent you maintain in the organization in the long term, some of the investment you made those decision makers gets only better and better return on the investment when you upskill them with this kind of technology, knowledge and understanding. And I call them citizen data scientists. We're going to talk about this maybe in coming weeks. I have a program coming with digitalshelf Institute. We're going to launch a course for citizen data scientists. We're going to touch upon this. So then building this smart data infrastructure, which I like the term smart data, building the smart data infrastructure and also tying them to the business use cases, commercial objectives is half of the battle. And then how are you guys building the capabilities required to run this infrastructure and tying it into the internal users?
Yeah, so important from a data point of view here, as I said, it's half the battle. We always need to link actually the right capabilities, playbooks and processes to it so that you get also meaning out of the data and actually make it scalable. But not only in an insights and data world, also the commercial capabilities are really crucial. And I know it's Andy's favorite topic, so I hand it over to him.
Yeah, no, it's a passion project. I think what folks don't maybe necessarily appreciate about the world that we operate in is it's not as established and it's not the same, even though there's a lot of similarities as the offline world. So where, BAYER is 150 years old, as an example, in relationships with the likes of Walmarts and Tesco's, etc., go back a long time. E-commerce is still relatively new and it has a lot of nuance to it, right? So and actually, pretty much all of us actually came from the offline world, so we can appreciate things a little bit more holistically. And someone told me once, you can't take the algorithm out to dinner. And I think that's a really great example of how things are very different. So if you think about the offline world, you have a lot more time to consider and execute your plans with customers, right? You've got the classic 6 to 12 month range reviews. You've got points of distribution. You've got all of these typical processes which allow you to plan your business. And so it is like a pinball machine. And when we look to then build capabilities that allow us to operate in that world, we need the data and the infrastructure and the speed of which that allows us to then pivot and be agile. So when it comes to capabilities of managing products, understanding value, understanding who the shopper is, and creating personalized experience, it's a very, very, very complicated topic that requires a whole heap of new capabilities.
I know from one of our past conversations, you mentioned about these nuances between different functions. Just for my and the audience's understanding, can you break down the main functional towers in the BAYER organization? Which towers are you bringing together for these nuances and capability infrastructure?
For sure. So when we think about an operating model, you've got a couple of core parts. You've got, in effect, the piece that faces into our business. You've got the turbine that we use to grow, which is our organization. And then you have the enabling elements to allow us to actually succeed. And there are different teams and stakeholders within each of these that we need to bring on that journey. So to break those down, you have the core sales organization that we need to then evolve a holistic channel strategy within. You've got
Which commerce is your passion and love?
absolutely. We have the marketing and brand organization, which are the folks that we're ultimately delivering their promise to the consumer. And you've got the overall vision and strategy of the business within the region. So this is almost the element that faces into our organization. You then have our turbine, which we've talked about, which is in effect understanding how to be differentiated in a powerful way using insights, be able to grow the business and generate that demand in an e-com way. How we then set up our organization from a teams and end-to-end supply perspective, which is also where some of the data piece starts to come in. And then finally, you have how do we optimize this in a way that is profitable for us and our customers to then reintroduce value into that flywheel, and then it keeps spinning, right? But it has to, at any point, if it breaks, then the model kind of breaks.
And is this where the smart data engine comes into play, feeding all these functions you just lined up?
Exactly. So our enabling elements are the great team that we have, so the talent, the culture, what we're trying to create as a business, the tech infrastructure, so the backbone of what we do, including the compliance element, in healthcare it's particularly important, the governance, and then the data and analytics, right? And these are the critical enablers that allow us to do what we do.
This is so meaningful and necessary because we all talk about these multiple touch points, customer journey is not linear anymore. And another reality us many CPG executives face, customers don't shop in single channel, and let alone single player. So from reviews to price promotion, from loyalty points to delivery convenience, they constantly levitate between players, between channels. And this structure, the seamless nuances organization with smart data engine behind it, is the only possible way in our current environment in this ecosystem to meet the customer where they are, in what context they are shopping in. So then how are you securing the internal persona alignment? How are you convincing your internal users to adapt this new infrastructure? How are you getting them on board? And how is the engagement with this new structure going to take place?
I would say it's a lot of change management. So it's not an easy process to bring everyone on this journey, but actually success writes a story. And because actually what we are doing right now is a success model for BAYER.
Right. It's massive undertaking.
Because we're changing how we're doing things. But we need to convince all these different functions to come with us on the journey. And therefore, it's actually crucial to involve them early in everything we do. So, and it's a joint effort in the end. It's not we are the dictatorship, but we try to search also for mutual value for, as we said, customers and consumers, but also then for all of the other functions. Because what we do, big topic is always for e-commerce and cannibalization versus incrementality.
True.
So therefore, every time we are trying to solve something new for us in the e-commerce channel, we directly think about, okay, how does it affect the offline channel? And bring then a solution which actually help both of us. Because in the end, you said 75% of consumers are looking actually online or have multi-touch points before they shop. So in this story we bring along. So actually if we're doing something in e-commerce, for example, improving our PDP, listing a new item on Amazon, yes, it has an Amazon effect, but at the same time we make clear to the business, look, because the consumer can now find it better online, you have also benefit offline.
You mentioned the seamless integration of the e-commerce across channels and across markets, and I also mentioned that internal integration, internal seamless cohesion of the BAYER functions coming together, which is amazing. And I heard you have a really good term for this brand initiative. Could you please a little and share more information about this new undertaking?
Sure, it's a lot bigger than us. It's a company-wide initiative, which is all about reimagining the world we work in with our key partners and our consumers right at the heart of it, and putting the power into the hands of people who make decisions for those folks. And it's called DSO.
Love it. Putting the power into the hand of the people who's running it.
The new concept of working, I would say, it's changing everything, and we are the first company who is doing it. And perhaps you have heard it in a talk of Bill, our CEO, who loves this topic. And it's also one which gets close to my heart, honestly, because if you think about it, the world is so dynamic right now, and we need to become more customer focused, more agile, and focusing on real outcomes, which for BAYER's health for all, hunger for none. So, and that's at the center of all we do. So it's the outcome we want to drive, and outcome is also typically DSO terminology, which you will hear more and more about. What we're doing is focusing in an agile way to deliver on 90 days goals.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah. And not only this, but we are also changing how we work. So there are no longer hierarchies within BAYER. So we're working as united teams or squads to achieve our common goals, outcomes. And it's also less about what is your role title, actually. It's what are you good in, which is probably not even in your role title or in your CV, but your personal interest. So which motivates me all the time, because you can really show what you love to do to the business, which is new, because you know how it worked before. Okay,
we have all our tasks, we have all our job responsibilities, but dynamic shared ownership. This is motivational just by the title, let alone the responsibilities you're going to execute that you love.
Absolutely. And we are organizing ourselves now in self-organized team, right? Thinking about, okay, who could be the best person to deliver on our outcome and just deliver it. That's an amazing journey actually we're going through as an organization. It's really fascinating. And I have to say, in the beginning, I was also a little bit like, okay, is this going to work? Because we are used to generations of structure, planning, processes, and now we change everything. But it is working. Now I'm part of it.
But I can see the synergy behind, because let's look at what we've been doing the last 10 years. We see consumer behavior shift every couple of years, if not faster. So why not organizations should shift in terms of meeting the consumer and the context they're in and changing some things the business way being done the last 150 years. So I think it's the way approach, consumer centric, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, and meet the consumer in all these digital touch points in an organizational way and make employees happy, or give them the satisfaction for the daily job.
It's one of those things which sounds easier to do, perhaps, than it is. And on the flip side, the concept of what we're talking about is removing hierarchies and therefore getting as close to the folks who make the decisions as possible. And we believe that will mean that we are more meaningful in everything that we do. We're close to the customer, we're close to the consumer. However, we are 150 years old, and I think the reason that that companies don't necessarily shift in that agile way is because they are behemoth structures with teams, thousands, in many cases tens of thousands of people, and being able to shift in that agile manner as almost a startup might is easier said than done. And I would say there's a lot of people who are still very skeptical that BAYER can fully achieve this, or indeed any company of our size. The thing that I think is quite powerful for us is that, in a way, our e-commerce business is a proof point that it can work. So if you go back to 18 months ago, we designed a team that was not based on any other model within the business. We looked at what was the consumer looking for, what were our customers needing, and where was the growth for us within the channel. We then built a model which was a flywheel structure, not set up by verticals. It was different people with different skills, all come from different places. And then we built a broader team around that, purely based on what they could do and what they were passionate about, as Andre said. And the thing that's really powerful about that is that you end up with people who are not necessarily mercenary or fixed about what they're doing. You get people who are a bit more missionary about the task. So what we can do is we don't have almost a single voice. Let me rephrase that. We have one single voice made up of all of us. Everybody's got an equal share at the table. So Andre, myself, and MT, who's not here with us today, we look at things as a flywheel, a collective, and the customer and the consumer at the middle. And we know that our teams are equally in that circle, in that thread. And that's what's allowed us to actually make decisions and make changes, which people at BAYER never thought were possible.
I love the idea behind giving each individual, each team player, certain initiative or freedom to drive their own agenda while contributing to the one voice and while contributing to the organization's success, but it's shared and it's dynamic at the individual level. And when you bring all these individuals, of course, and it's the energy of the team, it will be dynamic at the organization level, which is great. I've seen in action, not the term, not the initiative, but I've seen the independence, freedom, and giving employees a startup or founder mentality. In another company that I worked for in the past, it works wonders. And I'm very curious, very positive about how it will translate itself into success with BAYER. Hopefully we're going to catch up with you guys in a couple of months or a couple of quarters to see how it's revealing itself. Mm-hmm. So this was exciting. DSO, dynamic shared ownership, and stemmed from online e-commerce success and infused itself into the broader organization, massive global company like BAYER. This is going to be, I think, a case study in many publications, hopefully. Maybe we'll be the first talking about this, who knows. Thank you very much for sharing all this great information, all the insights. I love smart data approach, which I'm also educating myself. I love the unified commerce approach, which we worked and discussed a lot in the past. And we'll be looking forward to the results of this great work. So guys, thank you very much for joining eCommert podcast. Before we wrap it up, I will ask you to wrap it up with your own thoughts and give us some kind of tidbits or insights. Where do you see digital commerce going in the next 5 years? If you had to summarize it in 3 words, where do you think the opportunity or the biggest impact will be other than Gen AI? Please, yes.
Do you want to go first or shall I?
For me, it's relatively easy. It's the holistic omni approach. So actually the influence of online and offline. It will be unified commerce, again, buzzword, but that's going to happen.
Holistic omni approach. I'll take that.
Mm-hmm. I would say the things that I would be looking at are ecosystem, personalization, and scale. I think these are the things that we really need to understand as companies to be able to win in the future.
I love it. Ecosystem, personalization, and scale, which is all stem from commerce, just between the two of us. Yeah. Guys, thank you very much. Thanks for joining eCommerce. It was great meeting you. And hopefully the audience had fun and great insights from our conversation. We're looking forward to seeing the results of the DSO in coming months.